You won't believe this Will Rogers Star Trek connection. Today, episode 237 of Life Support Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you right here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47, Trekland HQ we call it, for the big picture, clarity, and sanity in all things Star Trek, and sometimes a little known story. Hey everybody, welcome back to our Tuesdays here, especially if you're with us live. If you're watching later on YouTube, you should watch us live sometime on a Tuesday. Happy holidays, whatever you're doing, wherever you are around the globe. This is something that's bubbled up. And I know, some of you know that I'm a big Will Rogers fan. I docent out at the Will Rogers Historic State Park, which is basically Will Rogers and his family's home in Los Angeles, the eventual pinnacle of their home, for about 10 or 12 years before his untimely death on vacation, basically, with Wiley Post, the great pioneer aviator, in Alaska, of all things, at the very top of the world in 1935. And I know that feels like a million years ago, but as we are figuring out with modern day, there is no such thing as dusty history. The things they ignored or didn't teach you, maybe even for a purpose, back in grade school and high school, so much of our history is so relevant to today. But you know what? On the entertainment side, on the human interest philosophy, and just staying sane in a crazy world side, as well as an innovator in about, 47 kinds of media platforms. Seriously, you can't beat Will Rogers. And I would love to go on and on about that. But let me just tell you that if you took Bob Hope, Tom Hanks, Jimmy Stewart, wadded them up in a ball, took every late night comedian with a talk show from Jack Parr and Carson and Steve Allen, Letterman and Leno, and, Jon Stewart and Steve Colbert and Kimmel and all of them today, Trevor, all of the late night hosts who do a nightly monologue. Will invented the nightly monologue, only he did it live on stage at the Follies in New York. But enough about Will. No one else liked him, took over media as media was being invented, backed into it with an aw shucks kind of attitude, and was a quarter Cherokee, more or less, and an Okie. That's why he was the number one box office star for the last couple of years in a row of his life before he died. That's why people around the world could not get enough of him and why it needed 3 funerals in New York, LA, and Oklahoma City to mark his death. I can tell you all this if you ever come out for a tour. Some Sunday, every other Sunday or so out at the park, I'd love to take you on a house tour. But the point of today is in preparing, yes, a panel, more or less, for our docents party, updating a topic I talked about over the years, an unknown nugget of Will's career. He did 21 talkies after the talkies came in, but he also did a slew of 48 or 50, depending on how you name it. And look, the Oscars came in. Now, bear with me. This is going to be a great story, and I will wind up with Star Trek, okay? I also will wound up telling you about, if you aren't aware of it, the great gift offer that's going to go through the holidays, but if you want it delivered, if you've got someone you got to get a gift box to by Christmas, the deadline is the 17th, Friday, for this great buy 5, get a 6th month free, and all the swag in the box. It's a gift box. LarryNemecek.com. Holly 21. Your own Portal 47 in a gift box. That's what's going on this week, plus other things too. But this story bubbled up. It's kind of incredible. And I will get to science fiction and Star Trek. So in 1922, in the silent era, and yes, before the Oscars, the Academy Awards began in the silent era. They had barely a year. The first year or two were silent movies. Wings, actually, was the first Oscar Best Picture winner. So 5 years before that, 6 years before that, in 1922, Will is the lead after having done, cowboy and, cowboy-ish adjacent kind of stories because he was raised on a horse and he was a roper going into show business. He was cast as a kind of an Ichabod Crane type, a kind of headless horseman, right? It was a movie called One Glorious Day. Will played Professor Ezra Botts, who was a small-town college professor, tinkering scientist. Think Doc Brown, okay? He was a Doc Brown type in a small town. He had a girlfriend, but he was so shy, he wasn't pursuing her. The big Brutus of the town was a guy who was after her and looked like he was going to wind up with her. But Professor Botts, I should say, his main interest was spiritualism. and it was a big rage at the time, but separating the soul from the body and the spiritual realm and, a seance-y kind of thing, only with science. Well, Professor Botts is conducting experiments, and he's trying to separate his body from his spirit. And he does. And we're talking 1922, and we're talking visual effects in 1922, and we're talking Will Rogers. So he's this milquetoast doing these experiments, and he does separate his spirit body from his body, which is kind of a wacky effect. At the same time, we see the spiritual plane, and it's kind of bizarre. But basically, it's all these spirits in the universe of this movie that are waiting to inhabit a body as it's being born. Except that our particular spirit that we're following, whose name is Ek, which is short for ectoplasm for some reason, it's almost like guys lining up to jump out, paratroopers in a plane. He's lined up to get his body as it's being born, but he does something to screw up, and he misses his slot, and his appointed body gets taken by somebody else, and he's told to go back to the line, the end of the line, and come around again. I mean, I know this is going to be spoiling it, but it's okay, because this is a lost movie. The nitrate, there's no record of it. For 20 years, no one's seen a copy of this, which is part of the saga as well. But first, Ek decides to go to Earth anyway and look and see what he can scavenge instead of waiting at the end of the line. And he sees Professor Botts, just as his own spirit has separated. So what do we have? We've got a Freaky Friday. We've got a Big-ish. We've got a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde-ish. Because Ek is a freewheeling spirit. He's rambunctious, even for a spirit on the spirit plane. And he transforms Professor Botts into the life of the party. He's the guy about town. He takes over the local bar. He takes over the club where the corrupt local politicians hang out. So, yeah. He winds up getting the girl, sending the lout away. Lila Lee was the actress, and the lout of the town was a guy named Alan Hale, who didn't even have to call himself Alan Hale Sr. because his son, Alan Hale Jr., was not yet lost on Gilligan's Island, the skipper. Small town. He gets the girl, he sends the lout packing, and he busts up the corrupt political ring in town. Yay! All of this in 30 minutes? Yeah, he gets the girl, he gets rid of her bad boyfriend, he saves the town, he's elected mayor, he's the hero of the day. Meek and all, his meekness is shed by the everything that he had done when he was being inhabited. Now, the film is gone. What's amazing about it, though, and lots of silent movies are sadly gone. That's why you see so many film preservation efforts, especially of the silents and older black and whites. But what's amazing about this is not only did Will Rogers play a lead role like that, he got insane critical praise for it. Now, this was 6 years before the Oscars. Hang on with me. We're going to get to science fiction. You can see it's science fiction already, but hang on. There's a twist at the end. The movie is reviewed. The New York Times said, Will Rogers is a revelation. Don't say he can only play parts that are, not much of a stretch. He goes from the meek professor to the, gallivanting guy about town. The National Film Board of Review, in the years before the Oscars, the National Film Review Board was kind of the acknowledged leader of naming its top 40 movies by rank. Lots of people had film critics already in the 20s. But the National Film Board of Review in its top 40 movies made One Glorious Day its number one. So you could say that if the Oscars had been around, there's a good chance that Will Rogers was the star of the best movie of the year. Okay, that's cool. If you're a Will Rogers fan, a film buff, that's all very cool. The visual effects are what. Ek is very creepy looking. He's got ping pong ball eyes. It's the 20s. It's really creepy. But that movie is among the silents that have disintegrated over the years. It's reviewed in detail by someone at IMDb. There was a science fiction fan and wannabe writer. The name he wrote with was F. Gwynplaine McIntyre. Now, he's got you can look him up. He has a Wikipedia page. Fergus Gwynplaine McIntyre, who after his death, his brother said that was probably a made-up name and a lot of his bio was made up. But this guy reviewed thousands of movies on IMDb in the early days. I found his review and learned all this detail about One Glorious Day from his review. Went on and on about it. And this guy he wrote the review in 2002. So how did he see this movie that was lost? Back in those days, you could write IMDb reviewers. And back in 2010, many chapters of this story, I wrote him and said, how did you know all this detail about a lost movie? He wrote me back in January of 2010 and told me that he had seen it in Europe in an archive, and it was disintegrating then, still intact, but he knew not to. He was at an archive where he was allowed to watch films. He knew running it through the sprockets of a projector would destroy it. So he had a viewer called a Steenbeck. Basically, it's kind of like an editing tool. You run the film through by hand. Now, it's a silent movie. It has titles, right? There's no vocal. So he's able to follow the plot as he pulls it through. He gets that about it. And he wrote this review in 2002 on IMDb. In writing to me in January 2010, he tells me that years ago, I guess he was an East Coast fan, maybe the safest thing to say was he had some short stories published, but he was a frustrated sci-fi writer, sci-fi author. So in the circles he traveled in, apparently back east, at one point in 2004, he was talking about this movie with Forey Ackerman. Forrest J. Ackerman, the Acker Mansion. Over the years, editor, publisher, huge fan, huge collector, the Acker Mansion was stuffed with decades of film and some literary references to all things science fiction, horror, fantasy. Forey died maybe 10, 12 years ago. Sadly, the collection's all busted up. I never went by the Acker Mansion. I know. But Forey was a force of nature across the 30s, 40s. The boom of sci-fi, even after Star Wars, and he lived long enough to see everybody come out of the closet and gain many new fans. Forey Ackerman. If you don't know Forey Ackerman's name, because here's the thing. Forey Ackerman told Fergus, our little young reviewer, Fergus McIntyre, Gwynplaine McIntyre, that when he was a child, in 1922, he was 4 or 5 years old, he saw One Glorious Day in the theater, and that's what made him a science fiction fan. It exploded his brain. The same kid that did that watching Star Wars in 1977, that was Forey Ackerman as a young kid in 1922, 1923, watching One Glorious Day in the theater, starring Will Rogers. And yes, Star Trek, because among his many credits, Forey Ackerman was the founder, editor, publisher of Famous Monsters in Filmland. And yes, before Starlog, before any other print sci-fi media, we had fanzines put out by fans, lit zines. But if you want to know the business and the behind the scenes of sci-fi, maybe it would break through to a mainstream magazine if it was big enough. But reliably there, month to month, at least by the 60s, was Famous Monsters of Filmland. And I know that before Starlog, before the mainstream world caught on, if you wanted to read the first really in-depth article in a magazine about Star Trek, 1966, 1967, there's a very famous issue of Famous Monsters. That was the Star Trek issue. Before you could Google it, before Memory Alpha, before any making of book, the first mass market approach you could get to Star Trek was in Famous Monsters of Filmland. And just think, we might not have had that early big blush, that early big peak at Star Trek without Forey, and we might not have had Forey without Will Rogers and One Glorious Day. Appendix 1, Will only got the role because it was supposed to be played by Fatty Arbuckle, Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, who was one of the first big sex scandals of Hollywood. And he got canceled. He got Me Too. There was a rape and a murder of supposedly he was allegedly involved with at a party one night of this young starlet. It boiled up and he was accused, and years went by, and some of the cooler heads were putting it together that it probably was not him, but he suffered for it. His career suffered. He came back and directed later under his father's names. It's a whole saga, the Fatty Arbuckle, but it was really Hollywood's, and politicians and moral crusaders seizing on it as the evils of Hollywood. Yes, I know, the evils of Hollywood, and he was, guilty or not, he was scapegoated, and the part was open. They totally reshot the movie, totally started over again, got Will as the lead. Amazing story number 1. Bittersweet story number 2. I was curious to see if the guy who unhinged all this, who made all this available, not just the fact that Forey saw this movie and it was his favorite and it was his shining star toward his fandom career and life, But just that there was a detailed review of One Glorious Day at all. Because one American happened to be in Europe at a film archive doing reviews of silent movies and happened upon it and watched it in such a way that he could record all this. Because there's nothing extant. There are stills. There are promotional stills. But there's no script. And there's no intact movie for sure. What's amazing is that I stumbled across his review on IMDb and found an email, and we corresponded, and he wrote me back in detail how he saw it, what he did, and even a couple of sidebars, including the Forey story. 6 months later, he has a Wikipedia page, and 6 months later, apparently, he was a troubled soul. He was suffering from mental illness. He came to hate his collection. He came to hate his writing. That's how it manifested. He tried to commit suicide. He was taken in and hospitalized, treated for some days, released, and then eventually did kill himself. 6 months after I had emailed with him. So I thank you, Fergus. You had a tortured life, apparently, but thank you for passing on this information on several fronts. I'm sorry, it's a bittersweet ending to this story, but it's an amazing story. And I can draw, it's a little thin at the end, but I can draw a straight line from Will Rogers and this amazing atypical movie for him, pioneering movie in the cinema, maybe the best movie of 1922, to Forey Ackerman, to science fiction, and to Star Trek. Who'd have thunk it? I had to do more than share it with our 15 docents. I wanted to share it with you all. Wow, so many twists and turns. And it even detectived out over 12 years now. I should compile this and share some of the insights. Wow, if you stayed with me through that, thank you, thank you. I just had to share that. And it does come back around to Star Trek at the end, right? So once again, I just want to remind you, the gift offer is up to the holidays. If you want delivery of Portal 47 in a box, there, I can mock my own picture. If you don't care about the gift box, if it's not for someone else, this will be good through the holidays. Again, at LarryNemecek.com/Holly21. And before we go any further, I do want to give a shout out also, of course, to all of our Patreons. Thank you in the TTL Club. Thank you, Diane Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, Nathaniel Robinson, and Blaze K. And our live wires, Rusty Harold, Halbert Gunn Johnson, Jalen Bullock, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, J.R. Poole, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks so much. If you would like to help out an expanding empire here online of the live streaming of Trekland, jump in patreon.com/Trekland Live. Patreon's the way you can support any creative doing anything on a one-off project or as a subscription. I have a very simple $5 and $10. Once a month, they take it out. Patreon does all that for you. And once a month, we do shout-outs for everybody here. Thank you so much for your support. Just to shout out also, you should know that the Trek Files is chugging along. This week, we have back with us George Pappy. We're talking about the movie anniversaries in December so much. There's another anniversary that does not get its due because it never had an air date. But yeah, the filming of the Cage pilot, Susan Oliver's incredible turn as Vina. George was the director of a bio documentary about Susan Oliver, an amazing life that needs telling as well, called The Green Girl. Right, you can check that out. But George is back with us because in her quest to become a director, Susan Oliver's agent wrote to Bob Justman, the first year of Next Generation, to see about coming on to direct on Next Generation. It's this week's episode out today on the Trek Files. Hope you can join us there. Life Support Live on Saturdays with Dr. Ali. Well, the real doctor and the fake doctor will not be with you this Saturday. We're on a holiday hiatus, but we will be doing a mid-Saturday. We'll be doing a watch-along between the holidays. So we'll be off this Saturday and then also Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Between the holidays, we're going to do a watch-along in midday time. So I will let you know when that is. Or you can go to the Facebook page, Life Support Live, and make sure you know what's going on with all of us. And then we'll be back on our regular Saturdays starting January 8th again. Hey, everybody. That's going to be it. If you're leaving us right now, I'm at Larry Nemecek's Trekland everywhere, especially YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Facebook and Instagram. And Twitter is just Larry Nemecek, okay? Portal47.net is where you can have a mini-con all year long with our monthly package. That's what's in the box. Well, there's some swag and cool stuff in the box because we're virtual. It's a chance to put something under the tree of the special Star Trek fan in your world. But if you are leaving us right now, please, 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 this is no joke. Stay healthy. Do all the things. Omicron's for real. The numbers aren't going down. They're not epidemic highs, but they are hanging around. And we don't want them to surge. So yeah, stay healthy, do all the things. Stay woke, check your sources. Most of all, would you? Trek well, everybody.